We are back here on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Tuesday, July 28th, as I am recording this. Getting to it a little later in the night than I had intended. The day got away from me. Uh, as you guys know, I do work a full time job outside of doing content creation. And by the time I got off work, yesterday was kind of a longer day, and we're going to get into that as to what I ended up doing yesterday. And by the time it got all through, I was um, just not able to get down and record earlier than I anticipated. Um, Now, yesterday, I want to thank Jason for stopping by. He was a great guest. We had a great discussion, talked about a lot of things. Um, I hope you guys enjoyed having guests on. I look to do more guests, reaching out to a few people. For the most part, I'm not going to be begging necessarily people to come on. But if you are interested, shoot me an email, analyticaliowan@gmail.com. We'll set something up, do the Zoom call. Um, Big thing, the few of the guests I am trying to reach out to, I am trying to get Iowa governor candidate Rob Sand on the show here. Uh, I'm going to email him one more time coming up. I know he is in the middle of his big uh, 100 town halls in Iowa's 99 counties tour that he does every year as part of being the auditor, but he is also doing it as part of his run for the uh, governor of Iowa. So I know he's busy, but I'm hoping I can get him on the show here for hour to hour and a half. We could have a good conversation, let him get his message out. Um, And from what I've gathered, he's got no problem, much like myself, being able to talk for an extended period. Um, Now, yesterday's show, I want to talk a little bit about sitting down with Jason. That went well. To be fair, it was my first experience actually recording through the Zoom process, other than the ones with Mike. And Mike already had all the format and everything set up for his podcast. Now, I wanted it to look more like what the Rational Boomer does, where it was side by side the entire way of the podcast, but I don't know what setting I had wrong where it showed just both of us as we were speaking. I think that worked out fine. I would prefer doing it the other way, but that works. If you guys have a preference, go ahead and leave me a note in the comments, and I'll try to set it up. Can't accommodate everybody, obviously, but I'll kind of go toward a consensus there as to what people want. Still working the bugs out of it. So that was a good show. Coming up, um, I might try to get over with Mike the Rational Boomer in the coming uh, days. If I'm not on, if I don't sit down with him Wednesday night, um, probably won't be able to go and record with him till um, after the weekend when my schedule clears up a little bit. Um, so I'm going to be doing another guest appearance coming up at some point over there on his show. Keep an eye out for that. I will leave all of the comments there, and I'll tell you guys all about it, obviously. So that's that. That's it for the updates. We got a lot to talk about. Most of this show is going to be talking about Iowa and the uh, general consensus about the governor candidate here in Iowa, Rob Sand, the Democratic candidate. Now, I've seen a lot of his ads and I've seen and read some stories about him. And I was convinced he had a good chance to win even before he entered the race. I had said he was probably our best chance to flip the state blue, given the fact that he was the only statewide elected Democrat. he won his seat in 2022 when Republicans gained even more control over everything in uh, the state house. Now, as far as where was I Monday? Well, I took a little drive Monday, went over to a nearby county, and there was a town hall for Rob Sand. I got the invite link. Um, Really kind of funny. I got sent an email or a text message rather, inviting me, but it was looking for somebody who had previously had my phone number. I had to recently, because of issues with my carrier, I had to switch providers, and ultimately I lost my old phone number. Um, that's neither here nor there, but I got this new number. And when I got the new number, apparently he was also a supporter of Rob Sand. And they were looking for him and said, "Hey, are you showing up?" Uh, and I've gotten other phone calls looking for this guy by name. Uh, don't remember the last name. I know his first name's Michael. I'm not Michael. I've never gone by Michael. I have never claimed to be a Michael. But said, "Hey, Michael, are you looking to? Are you going to be here at this town hall?" And I said, "Well, I'm not Michael, but yeah, I'll go." So I made the trip over. Got there about half hour, 40 minutes early, and it was busier than I had anticipated. Um, and it was a good event. There were a lot of people there. I bet you he drew in this town hall 400 to 500 people. Maybe, maybe I'm overestimating a little bit, but it seemed like quite a few. Far from what I was expecting, um, because I've seen him do town halls to rooms of 10 to 12 people, and there were several hundred people there anyway. Maybe I'm overestimating. Maybe it was closer to 300. I don't know. I never heard an exact total. Um, but the whole thing was a little over an hour. Um, and if you have never experienced a political town hall, I encourage you to go. If you are in Iowa and you can go catch Rob Sand, if you can go somewhere close to you, I encourage you to go check it out. They didn't waste a lot of time with long introductions and pre-speeches and everything like that. It was very quick. Um, the introduction to him when they finally decided it was time to talk and time to get started was about 2 minutes, not even. And he got right into his message. Now, doing this from memory, I meant to actually record this when I got home, but that didn't quite happen. Um, so my memory might be a little fuzzier on some of the questions that were asked and some of the big talking points of his message. But he's talking about not being redder or bluer, but being greener and truer. And what does he mean by that? That is one of his messages. He wants to do more to conserve, uh, you know, land for land conservation. He was talking a lot about uh, conserving wetlands, allowing you to go out and be able to fish on those lands, swim in the rivers, etc. And that would help cover um, and clean up a big problem that we have here in Iowa, which is high nitrates in our water. Um, that is one of the things he wants to do. He wants to fund the programs that are out there and help push and use the funds for all of it. Now, he talks a lot about accountability. As state auditor, that was one of the things that he was pushing a lot was accountability, affordability. Not affordability, accountability for a lot of things. Now, a lot of his resources were gutted by the Republican um, administration through Kim Reynolds and the Republican legislature. And he wants to restore the powers of the auditor's office. He believes that uh, the auditor's office needs a strong um, a strong presence and a strong ability to do their job. He also talked about how he's got a legal background, and most of the people in the auditor's office were uh, business people. They were CPAs, they were professional auditors, those kind of people. And while there's nothing wrong with having those kind of jobs, they didn't really push hard to go after people who were having problems with, or who were doing things illegally, rather, when it comes to finances. And he talked a lot about his time in the auditor's office and the things he has done, including uncovering one of the largest lotto cheating scandals in the nation, and how they prosecuted and got convictions, etc. And it affected change and went after people who were cheating, etc. And uh, in varying situations, trying to save taxpayer dollars. Now, one of the things he talked a lot about was taxpayer dollars. And he sounded more like a conservative Republican in some regards. Why? Because he was talking about being fiscally responsible, doing things to protect taxpayer money. He is talking about, yes, possibly having to raise taxes here in Iowa. Now, I know that's always an issue when people talk about raising taxes. Why would he talk about raising taxes? Well, he's talking about raising taxes to fix budget shortfalls. But those budget shortfalls are there because this administration cut taxes and didn't offset the income anywhere, also didn't offset the spending anywhere. So we might have to raise taxes. We may have to look at cutting some government expenditures. And then he has to look at the rest of it and say, okay, what can we do here? How can we fix it going forward? So as he's doing all of this, he's talking about a lot of accountability. And he wants to hold people accountable across the aisle, not just go along to get along. Um, he said he is going to take his personal ideologies with him into the governor's mansion. Um, and it's not just, well, we've always done it this way. That's not the way he wants to make it happen. Just because we've done something a certain way for a decade or two or three or 12 or whatever the case may be doesn't mean it's right. And he said there's a lot of things we can fix by changing how we do things and by holding people accountable. It's a big underlying theme of his message. One of the other things he talked about, which I thought was very interesting, is he wants to change, in a way, he wants to change how voting works in Iowa. Twofold. One, he wants to change your party affiliation so it is not required to vote in the primary. Now, to my knowledge, I have never registered in the Democratic primary or in the Democratic Party. I have voted in the Democratic primary. I don't know if that actually set me up to be a registered Democrat or not. Um, and if it did, I can live with that. It is not going to be the worst title ever given to me. Um, but he was talking about divided government, and he made a good point. For a long time here in Iowa, we had divided government. We were a purple state all the way across the board. We might have had a Democratic controlled legislature with a Republican governor, a Republican legislature with a Democratic governor, up until we got Joni Ernst as our senator. We had um, a Democrat and a Republican senator. And it was one of the things that he talked about was this idea that they canceled each other out. And he's right. Having divided government here in the state of Iowa did cancel each other out. They had to work across the aisle to get things done. So if at the time he was referring to Tom Latham, who was a longtime Democrat, and then there was still, because he's older than dirt and been there my entire life, Chuck Grassley. But because we had those two as our senators, they would actually start working together to, while they were of different parties, it wasn't this headbutt ideological nightmare that I can't possibly back what you're doing because you got the wrong letter next to your name that we have today. So, with all of that, he was pushing for uh, a better idea, saying that we need to do more and go back to divided government. He is convinced he is going to have a divided legislature, that they may be Republican controlled, and they are going to fight him at every step of the way. And that's entirely possible. But he is talking about changing the primaries, making it an open primary. He is also talking about making it closer to what California has. If he gets his way, is he would want it to be more like a what they sometimes have referred to as a jungle primary. Now, how that works is it would be the top. He didn't say two; he was saying three or four because he wants to enlist another change as well. It almost sounded like ranked choice voting, but he doesn't like the idea that only the top two who realistically have a chance at winning make their way to November, and that those are the only ones you can possibly vote for. And while he did make some points about his opponent, Zach Lane, he saved those till almost the end, and he only talked about him for about a minute or two, instead focusing almost all of his time on his message. And with that, he was talking about um, how he would rather select the top two or three or four, or three or four rather, or have more choices because he doesn't like this lesser of two evils mentality. But he did say if you have a problem with Zach Lane, vote for me. He goes, that's the easiest way to help. But his point was it shouldn't come down to which side do I like less. The other thing he was talking about is what he called approval voting. Now, what he says it should be, and in a way, I kind of understand what he is saying. I don't know if it will ever pass. Is that instead of going in and selecting who you want to vote for, the question would become, do you approve of this person, yes or no? And you can vote for as many as you want. And basically, then person with the highest approval percentage gets the win. That's going to be a harder sell. I don't know if that's going to happen, but he may end up having to find a middle ground with ranked choice voting. Now, we've talked about ranked choice voting before. And if you are unfamiliar with ranked choice voting, I'm going to give you a very quick, brief description of ranked choice voting. And that is you go ahead, you go into the voting booth, and if there's 4 candidates, 5 candidates, 6 candidates, whatever that number is, you list them in order that you want them to win, one to whatever. Now, what I don't know about ranked choice voting is if you do not select, like if there's 5 candidates and you only rank one, two, three, does that mean your vote doesn't count if your top three do not win? I don't know. But effectively, what they do is they look down the ballot, okay? They add everybody up who voted for candidates 1 through 4, and they rank them all, right? Okay, well, candidate A got 20% of people saying we want them as our number one choice. Candidate B got 40%. Candidate C got 30%. And candidate D got 10%. Well, candidate D got 10%. Okay, he's out. Now they look at everybody who voted for candidate D for number one because nobody got over the 50% win threshold. And now they say, okay, well, that 10%, who'd they vote for? Who'd they pick for number two? And then they add those numbers back in. And now, if they all went for candidate B's at 50%, he wins. She wins, whoever it is. Really simple way of explaining it. I don't know if we're going to go to that route. He also wants to push to keep Iowa as the first in the nation caucus, in part because Iowa law says so. Now, he's not happy with the Democrats for trying to change Iowa's first in the nation status and saying, well, if you do it early like that, your delegates just won't count. He doesn't like that. So he's going to push for Iowa. Beyond that, he does talk a lot about reaching across the aisle. He is very much a candidate for everybody. He knows that we have to have political discussion. Now, for the most part, there's a lot of conservative Republicans that are not MAGA that we can discuss with. And I think those are the ones he's talking about. Now, when it comes to MAGA and the Donald Trump cult, I know we can't reach across the aisle and work with them. They're too far gone. And the Republican Party, in my opinion, is going to be struggling for a little bit. But what happened, or what he was discussing in his town hall, Rob Sand made a good point. Having 10 years of one party rule can be a problem, both ways. And now we have to worry about it. If he gets control, he might have to fight through divided government for a while. But if he doesn't and he can get his stuff accomplished, great. But then ultimately, we need to, in his words, put back divided government, and make it so that he doesn't have complete power because it doesn't always work either direction. I don't know if I 100% agree with him on that. I think the idea of being able to work across the aisle is great in principle. The problem is when one side is obstructing anything and everything, and the other side is trying to make real actionable change, there's a big difference there. Now, as we are dealing with it, we are going to have to go forward. I think he has got a good chance at winning. One of the other things he talked about was he mentioned his grandfather going out and having coffee at 4 or 5 different places every single day. And how, and you guys all know this example. There's everywhere you go, there's a group of people sitting around having coffee. And what are they doing? They're solving the world's problems. They're having a political discussion, much like what we do here, or at least more like the lives, I guess, than this. But they sit down and they're discussing everything, politics, right? And they've got answers for everything. Some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. But they don't ask a lot of times political affiliation before you sit down. You sit down, you have your cup of coffee, you bullshit about the weather for a little bit, and then somebody brings it up. They start having a conversation. And sometimes in that conversation, you get people to come across the aisle and go, I never really thought about it like that. And for some issues, you can do that, especially, and I've said it before, when it comes to financial issues. It used to be for a lot of things, Republicans and Democrats agreed in principle on a lot of the main issues. it came down to, okay, it used to never be controversial, the food stamp program. It was sort of controversial, but the biggest problem wasn't getting Republicans and Democrats to agree that people should be able to eat. The question came down to how much money. Now the question almost becomes, um, should they, if they're on assistance, should they be able to eat whatever they want? Republicans say no, that they want to have more control over what types of food you can get if you're on assistance, things like that, and that's not right. Um, he talked about, you know, doing more for people who need assistance. He talked a lot about how they are looking at something I have suggested in the past, and that is a stair step program. Now, right now, the way almost all assistance in the state of Iowa operates, it's an all or nothing formula. And either you qualify or you don't. And if you do, well, here's the problem, right? You qualify, great. You get whatever benefits you want. But if you want to work more and you want to do more, suddenly you're making too much money and you can't support yourself. But as I've talked about in the past with coworkers of mine that have been in this situation, they turn around and they're left deciding between, do I take less hours at work to make sure I qualify for the programs and I get the assistance, I get my medical, I get food stamps, I get energy assistance at the end of the year if I need that, and I get XYZ, etc. Or do I lose all of it to make $20 extra on my paycheck right now? And that's the problem. That's the fight, right? They are trying to walk that tightrope to make sure they make enough to survive. But if they make too much, they don't get any benefits. And he was suggesting that they want to look at um, doing a stair step program where I'm going to throw out numbers. I don't know. He didn't go into a lot of details. I'm going to make this up because this is what makes sense to me. So if if full assistance ends up being you make $2,500 a month gross, okay, which really isn't that much money. 20, actually, let me pull up a calculator here. Calculator. Let's do simple math, actually. At $10 an hour, actually, most jobs now pay 15. So let's say 15. Yeah, that's $2,400. Okay. If you're making $2,400 a month, you're making under 2,400 a month. Let's say you qualify for 100%. And they were paying your insurance for you with Iowa Medicaid. And you got food stamps and etc. Well, now let's say your new number is $20 an hour. I already screwed up the math. Now you're making 3,200. Maybe that's the new goal, right? And you get 75% of what they were paying before, and you only have to come out of pocket for that 25% difference for your Medicaid insurance and your food stamps. Okay, you get an automatic reduction, but you still get something. And a lot of you are going to say, well, how far can this go? Well, let's just keep it going. Then if the next step is 4,800, 4,800 seems like a pretty good number, right? That's $30 an hour. should be able to support yourself on that. But when rent, right off the bat, even around here, is sitting at $1,000 to $1,200 a month, 4,800 pre-tax doesn't actually sound that great because you're probably only going to keep 2/3 of it. So that's at 3,200 right there. And if your rent is 1,200, you're down to 2,000. That's before you pay for a car payment, before you pay for a cell phone plan. That's before you put any food on the table. That's before you pay for your insurance. And it goes on and on and on. And I don't know what those numbers are. I'm just throwing them out there. He didn't elaborate on specifics, but he wants to make it easier for people to get off the systems because it shouldn't be straight yes or no. He wants to put in more protections for people with disabilities who want to work. And that goes back to what we were just talking about. Because people with disabilities are at a disadvantage. They want to work. This administration has villainized the Trump administration, and Republicans in general have villainized people who are disabled. For example, the person asking the question is deaf. And she said she wants to work. Problem is, there are people who say she is taking the job from somebody who can hear. If her job doesn't require much in the way of an accommodation, especially if it is something, say, computer based, where you can handle everything by email. I don't know what she does. Her lack of being able to hear isn't a problem, and in fact, we can do a lot of things with people who are disabled. They can do a lot of jobs, right? Republicans would have you believe that they are taking a job from an able bodied person. What DEI would actually have you believe, and what we need to get back to in pushing this idea, is that, again, I don't know what her line of work is, but just because she is hard of hearing or deaf does not mean she's not qualified for the job. Now, if it was a job that specifically required a sense of hearing for whatever reason, like it was like fundamental to the job, that's different. Okay? I mean, we do have devices now. We have our smartphones. We have a lot of things that can do things that are assistive for a lot of people that have disabilities. And I know some people who are disabled that can outwork people who are not, whether we are talking physical disabilities, mental disabilities, or other limitations. And he wants to go in and try to make it easier for people like her to get a job, to be employed, um, and to not have such a problem with disabled people that uh, are struggling to now pay their bills. And in fact, one of the things I'm hearing from other sources, I haven't had to deal with it myself. I am fortunate. Um, but I have heard from other people with these income guidelines that the income guidelines have not moved since the 90s. Well, in the 90s, you were 90s and early 2000s being told, well, you can have up to this much in assets was a considerable amount of money. And I think that number is like $2,000 or $2,200. But anymore, that's not a lot. Okay. $2,200 vehicle is, you know, at this point, a 20-year-old vehicle that's still running. that hopefully has less than 150,000 miles on it. And that's before you're at $2,200 in assets. That's before you start looking at clothes and TV, furniture, anything like that. You know, and most of those people who get disability help, asset would also consider the house. You have to do special things, so their house like has to be filed in a certain way. I don't know all of the details. I just know it's way more complicated than for uh, non-disabled people to go out and purchase a home, things like that. And Rob Sand was talking about it. He wants to fix a lot of it and doing that to make Iowa better and to make Iowa better for everybody. Immigration got brought up, and he wants to go back to a time in Iowa where it used to be the mindset around here that if you're here to work and not cause problems, didn't really care about your immigration status. Didn't care what country you came from, didn't care what color of skin you had. I mean, he didn't bring it up, but it is something I do know from other research I have done. Iowa passed the first of its kind, first in the nation, anti segregation, equal rights style laws ahead of everybody. 1867, 2 years after the Civil War. Almost beat the federal government by a century before they got to civil rights. By almost a century. Because the idea here in Iowa was you're here working, you're doing things to make your community better. You're fine. You're paying your taxes. You're not causing any problems. It's not a big deal. Now, all of those things are reasons why I think Rob Sand could get elected here in Iowa. And I've spent a lot of time talking about this in his message because I think it's important. The other part of this, the other takeaway from all of this is while I had a good idea of his message ahead of going to this town hall, there is a big difference between reading an article, seeing a campaign ad, and listening to the person speak. One of the other things, speaking of campaign ads, before I continue that thought, this just popped into my head is he was going back to his idea and his vision for this other way of voting. Is he doesn't like the fact that everything is negative, right? Nothing but the worst things you can possibly say about the other person. And he with his vision, he wants to get to a point when the ads are being spent and all of the money is being spent more on talking about what you're going to do, not how bad the other person is, right? And I agree with that. He wants to get back to an Iowa where we can have these discussions, where we can talk policy, we can talk about um, differing viewpoints, and in doing things to leave Iowa better for the next generation. Now, I think he has got a really good chance of winning the governor's race. I do. And I think he has got a chance of not only winning the governor's race, but taking a lot of people across the finish line with him by energizing Democrats to get out and vote. But one of the things I'm talking about here, where I was saying where I started, I guess, is it's different than listening to the ads, is if you can get out and go to a town hall. You know, we see them on TV like for the presidential town halls, and you hear, and I've even covered some of them for other candidates where Republicans go to these town halls and they get heckled, they get booed. they face tough questions that they don't have answers to, or they just quit showing up. If you can get to a town hall with a political candidate and hear from them, it is an entirely different experience. Now, this is one of the few times I've done one of these in my life. Most of the time, like a lot of people, I got my experiences when it came to politics and my knowledge from news articles and you know news clips and now social media and things like that. He also was talking about how he doesn't like how narrow-minded social media has made us, and he's got a good point there. Um, it was just a really, really good town hall. And again, if you have a chance to go catch Rob Sand, if you are in Iowa, I encourage you to go check it out. If you have a chance to, um, you know, donate to Rob Sand, I encourage you to donate to the Sand campaign. Um, now, if you want me to make a link tree with some of the links to some of the candidates I support, I can do that. Leave me a note in the comments. I am more than willing to take the time to do that, um, and go from there. Now, I did try. I talked to one of his staffers. Um, I tried to get my name out there. I tried to reach and talk to Rob. Said he was talking to people, but his schedule was rather tight. Um, he wrapped up a, about 20 minutes after he was scheduled to, originally. So he went a little overboard, and he had just about enough time to make the drive to get to the next town hall on his list. Like I said, he is doing 100 town halls in all of Iowa's 99 counties. Now, why are there 100 town halls? Because one of our counties, and I don't remember which one, and I do not unfortunately remember the story behind it, but it does have dual county seats. I think it was because they merged two counties together at some point and they kept both county seats going. Um, but I did look at his schedule. Um, he is going to be back close enough by that I can make another trip uh, and get to him at another town hall here coming up. And then, of course, when he does finally make it to uh, my home county, I'm also going to try to get to one of the town halls and have a discuss, and see if the message changed. See what it's is he changing the message based on the area? And I don't think he does. The other thing is I wanted to have a chance to talk to him. Now, like I said, I did reach out to one of his staffers. I did not get a chance to talk to him directly, but I am trying to get my name out there to get him here on the show. If I could get Rob Sand, the governor candidate for the Democrats in Iowa, here on the show, that would be amazing. I do have some questions for him. And one of the questions he talked about, he did sort of answer, but he also didn't in this town hall because he did talk about age limits. And I think he was taking more of a jab at Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and Lindsey Graham than he was in, necessarily Chuck Grassley, because you don't take shots at Chuck Grassley in Iowa. It's just he can win with 65% of the vote, not even do anything, and not really campaign. He's very much loved in the state. But he was talking about upper age limits, things like that. He's like, we have other jobs, which is true, that require you to end up having mandatory retirement. So why not for politicians? And it gets younger people involved. You always bring in new ideas, and maybe you bring in a fresh perspective, and something can get accomplished. So I wanted to ask him what his thoughts are if the opportunity arose to replace 92-year-old Chuck Grassley. In part because he's 92 years old. If he doesn't wake up tomorrow, no one is going to be surprised. They would be planning the next funeral. Now, I think we would find out much quicker with Chuck Grassley than we have with Mitch McConnell because there is a Republican governor here in Iowa. And she would just get to pick his replacement. And by all accounts, the last rumor we had heard was that the plan had always been to put his grandson Pat in that seat and make sure that the name kept saying Grassley on the ballot so that people didn't know any better, didn't know any different, that kind of thing. So I want to ask him who he would pick. Would he pick a Republican or a Democrat? But then he was talking about something I touched on earlier. He was talking about the idea of divided government being better. So it makes me wonder if he would appoint a Republican or if he would appoint a Democrat. Because he's not big on teams and clubs in so much that he he doesn't like the fact that you have to join one of the parties in order to have a realistic chance. Now, he said the Democrats most closely align with where he stands, but he's more or less an independent. And I think his version of being a Democrat is going to resonate with people. And I think he is going to end up uh, being uh, someone who can reach across the aisle, bring people together. And that is a good thing. Now, he talked about his opponent, Zach Lane. And a couple of the things with Zach Lane, he made it a good point. Zach Lane lives in Kansas. He has Iowa residency, basically just the 2-year to a day residency that was required to run for office, to run to be governor, not the requirement of somebody who is, a lifelong Iowan, like Rob Sand, who has familial ties to the state going back, you know, multiple generations. And that's not knocking anybody who is a first generation immigrant or whatever, but where I'm knocking is Zach Lane, who spends the majority of his time in Kansas because he's got familial obligations there with his uh, ex and kids and things like that. And he has said, well, I'll spend as much time as humanly possible being in Iowa. And Rob Sand made a good point. When have you ever heard somebody say, I'm going to spend as much time as humanly possible working on this, ever actually say it and mean it? Or is that something that you say when you have no intention of giving it as much effort as it needs? Sounds like the second one. Um, Zach Lane is not going to be a governor for all. He is going to be a uh, Republican first and foremost, and his biggest claim to fame, well, initially was he beat Randy Feenstra in the in the Republican primary, and he was the first Republican this election cycle with without a Trump endorsement to beat somebody with a Trump endorsement. And now Donald Trump has come out and endorsed him. That's about his biggest claim. And then the rest of it is all just how bad is Rob Sand going to be for Iowa? And he goes, when your biggest point, this is what Rob Sand said, and I agree with it. When your biggest point is how bad all of these Democratic policies are going to be for Iowa, when things aren't great right now and Republicans have had complete control for 10 years, how good is that going to actually work? But that's all they've got. And that's really all the Republicans have nationwide. It's the Democrats are bad, their policies are bad, things are going to get worse. But Republicans are in charge right now and things are getting worse. So how does that make any sense? It doesn't. So I encourage you, and I know I spent a lot of time talking about Rob Sand and his policies, and I hope you guys enjoyed this show today. Um, I, but I encourage you to go out and spend time at, town halls or um, speaking engagements. If they're not doing a town hall, but if they're doing a rally style event or whatever, I encourage you to go get involved. Now, not everybody can get out and get involved that way, but if you can, do. Uh, it changes your perspective a little bit. Still hoping, like I said, to get Rob Sand here on the show. That would be a great show and a great podcast. Beyond that, coming up tomorrow, I'm going to have another show. Going to be talking about a lot of things. We will have to discuss all of the news and national stuff that I did not get to today. Going to try to be on a little better track, I hope, about getting these podcasts up. Um, Maybe once I get through this week, it should be, I'm hoping, a little bit better. Um, but that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow with another podcast.